Hello, my name is Harrison. Depending on when you're watching this, it's either Christmas Day or New Year's Eve, just before 2024. Before the next year comes, I would like to talk about the past year, about how much things have changed, some details about some videos I created, and what I hope to have in store for next year. First off, thank you for the subscribers that I've gained this year. I honestly never expected this many subscribers, even though it caused something that I was hoping to be the sideshow to become pretty much the main show. Even if a lot of my audience is now the audience that would desire memes and not long content, hopefully any non-trained memes content will be enjoyed by some of you. So, let me talk about some of the videos that I've made over this year, what things I left out from them, how some of them came to be, and what details are included in some of them. Though something that I'd like to say first is that when you're making any of these videos, you need a script. I did most of these videos without any script whatsoever, and that's why you hear a lot of stuttering and me getting a lot of grammar incorrect, as well as a few facts wrong. So that's what I'd like to say first. Always have a script. Anyways, with that out of the way, sit back and relax as I present to you my 2023 recap video. To start off this recap, let me talk about my Amtrak Caltrain Journey series that I created. In the beginning, I always wanted to introduce the first video saying that you had a small amount of time to show the one thing that weird Gacha Life user Kazumi Eugene Elon Musk hated, which the answer was obviously trains. Originally, I didn't think of the conservative think tanks and libertarian think tanks for the video, but after seeing this article of a think tank opposing Minnesota's Northern Lights Express project, and another saying Texas Central was finally dead, which aged poorly, I decided to add them in. And yes, for the conservative think tank one, when the title said that the Northern Lights Express was still a waste of money, I had to say, you're a complete waste of money. Probably in hopes to trigger some anti-train guy. In this section where I say, your lie in April became we're fucked in April, and then we kinda weren't fucked in April. And then I later said, we're fucked in April became we're fucked in May, June, July, August, September, October, and so on and so forth until the year finally ended. And then they said that the year was never going to end and it would continue on forever, and then it ended. Yes, I legit believe that a bunch of random people on Reddit thought that the world actually was going to end in 2020. Now, some of you might be thinking, Harrison, why on earth would you believe a bunch of random Fortnite-hating Keanu Reeves simping neckbeards on Reddit who you thought actually knew the future? That is incredibly dumb of you, Harrison. Well, sometimes it doesn't matter what the source is. Eventually, after you hear it again out for a while, you eventually start to think that it could potentially be true. And that's what I was trying to show in that particular section. I could have decided not to, but because I legit thought that was true, I decided to put it in the video. So I essentially forced myself through a PTSD attack to essentially show that I truly did think that the world was going to end in 2020.
Also, one thing that I did not know until after I went on this trip was that the lead locomotive, Amtrak 201, actually had an EMD bell on it, which I honestly find really interesting.
Going into New Mexico, I'd pretty much always wanted to insert a Breaking Bad reference while we were traveling through New Mexico. And while I was traveling through New Mexico to actually film the semaphores, I actually want to make some kind of Breaking Bad reference because most people nowadays see New Mexico as the state that Breaking Bad was filmed in. Originally, I wanted to make a joke about it after we left the Raton Pass tunnel, but I didn't really think about it because I was dealing with Wandershare's issues at the time, and that I still am dealing with even while I'm editing this. Eventually, after many searchlights and many semaphores, I eventually got to Lamy and would refer to Breaking Bad once, where I talked about how an episode of Breaking Bad was filmed on the Santa Fe Southern Railway.
And it was actually featured in an episode of Breaking Bad where Walter and Jesse rob a freight train. And in that episode, they didn't make a fictional railroad, and instead just kept the Santa Fe Southern markings on them.
I would put in a Breaking Bad trap remix while entering the Albuquerque station because Albuquerque is where Breaking Bad was mostly filmed in. So I wanted to make my official Breaking Bad reference to where Breaking Bad was primarily filmed in. Though I kinda wish that I inserted in the original Breaking Bad theme.
Talking to you, train, man. Hey, baby. I got some beef. That ball's taking a break.
Out there. Is it 65? Yeah, so the Siri's just told me, so we'll see if Siri's is lying. Siri, oh, okay. The iPhone.
Moving on to the second part, entering to California, or I did originally intend to make or as the Texans would call it, joke, because Texas, and most of the internet too probably, just don't like California, so I thought it would be a decently fun joke to make. Now, we're in California, or as the Texans would call it, the dumb liberal state that's run by the libs. Though the joke was more related to politics, since Texas and California are pretty much polar opposites of each other, and both like to screw around with any state in their sights. Skipping over a few places and after passing over Cajon Pass and the accident sites that it has, as well as going down Cajon Pass and making it, I show a recording of Dad reading The Little Engine That Could by Waddy Piper, which was for a school that helps autistic kids like me. I originally wanted to use some music from the 1991 The Little Engine That Could movie, but decided against it and instead used the Escape theme from Thomas the Tank Engine. However, you can see a segment of the music that I wanted to use when we came into Los Angeles, as I then wanted to put the music in while entering LA, but I left most of that music out minus the very end of Nothing Can Stop Us Now when I got onto the Union Station platform, which I forgot to edit out.
Too much tension on it.
I did want to share what Dad and I did while we were in Santa Monica, including hanging out with a relative, but I wasn't sure whether to put it at the end of the second part or the beginning of the third part, so I left it out. But I but now since I'm doing this, I can share what I did, and I'll have Dad tell it for me.
This is Harrison's dad, filling in because Harrison had to go eat a donut. Harrison made an April Fool's prank. Then we went to a cafe on Venice Beach, walked around Venice Beach while also hanging out with a relative, and we went on to Santa Monica Pier.
Thank you, Dad. Now I'm back from my donut. Later on at the beginning of the second part, this is partially where I began dubbing charger sounds from the Left 4 Dead 2 charger onto the Siemens charger. After playing a game for a while, sometimes it has a bit of an effect on what you do for other things. When I talked about the Chatsworth train crash, I mentioned that somebody who was in the Chatsworth train crash actually survived the Glendale train crash that I mentioned earlier, but then died in the Chatsworth train crash. I honestly wanted to say that it would have been funny if it wasn't so sad, but I wasn't sure how it would have been said and if it was a good thing to say, let alone if it was too soon or not. Because by the time I was recording it, it had already been almost 15 years since, so I left it out. Probably for the better, though. You may also recall that I started talking about mechanical bells, and I wanted to include them because I just really like them. One interesting note is that some of the crossings on this line still have mechanical bells. Those are the bells that go clang, 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 instead of the current electronic bells that go bam, 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 bang, 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 bang. And that would just, and when they would stop, they would go bap. So, yeah, that's a bit of an interesting fact. Though if there's one thing that I really wish I could have included was an example of both a mechanical bell and an electronic bell. Given that I've been to Fort Collins, I pretty much have the mechanical bell example, so I kind of wish I inserted that in. So I'm traveling up the coast later and we would eventually pass San Luis Obispo. And I mentioned that I wish that there was a steam locomotive at the San Luis Obispo station because let's just say that I really like Southern Pacific steam locomotives and kind of wish that more were preserved. Meanwhile, going up the coast and coming into Salinas, you do hear in the background Dad and I talking about why a lot of people who can't afford houses would live would live in tents on the tracks, and I expressed my frustration because of how my generation would have to fix it. But I wasn't exactly sure how to fully express my frustration, so I ultimately left it out, and I think that's probably for the better, though. And besides, I don't think politics and things like homelessness is my thing, really. Right here, when I expressed my frustrations for how we got stuck behind a oil fire, yes, I was acting like that because my only thought was, why us of all the trains that could have been stuck behind the fire? We got stopped by a freaking fire! And yes, I am pretty sure that sticking your head out the window as a passenger probably was a railroad regulation violation. Note, I hear a lot of people saying that Stockton was worse than Oakland, so that's why I said that it could have been worse and that we could have been in Stockton when we got off the train.
Thankfully, we didn't get off the train at Stockton. Besides, the train doesn't go to Stockton anyways. Still, could be worse. We could be in Stockton right now, and Stockton is kind of worse than Oakland is. Also, yeah, Filmora is a pain in the rear. I'm pretty sure Filmora is starting to act up again. But for now, I'm a bit tired of editing this, so I'm stopping here. And going to the final part, part 4. At this point, I do talk about CHSR, which is the high-speed rail project in California that has been struggling for a bit, but has still carried on anyways. And while yes, I do believe that the project has had a lot of issues, and I feel like there could be some improvements to the project, like try and route them along the highways in stats land that California already owns instead of routing them through farmlands that could potentially drive up land purchasing costs. At least that project and Brightline West that'll be in the desert of California will have a pretty good impact on people who travel through California. Even if the CHSR project is taking a while, or at least will take a while. But at least they are doing something good. And if Brightline West can help California high-speed rail in constructing it, then Brightline West should definitely help California high-speed rail in constructing its line. Here, I briefly let Dad say a line in the microphone and just threw it in the video just for the sake of it, because I felt, why not?
Cool, and you should check it out. It's coming up right here.
Oh, we drive.
Here I talked about my joke that the housing issues would be alleviated for at least 10 seconds after a new apartment block opened, because most of California's issues, especially San Francisco's issues, primarily stem from a severe shortage of housing. And that's what I think is one reason that I saw a lot of new apartments being built along the Caltrain line. Since I've made the video, and since I visited San Francisco, I think the lack of housing issue is changing, for better or for worse depending on how you see it. And from what I've heard, San Fran's high housing prices have stalled, with other cities surpassing its insanely high pricey housing, as well as some of their prices dropping, at least so they say. Though, if you looked at satellite view from Google Maps of some of the cities that have the highest housing prices in California, it kinda makes you think if you're an affordable housing advocate. But again, that isn't something that I can explain, so again, the Wendover Productions video is something that I definitely recommend if you wanted to know more about California's problems, especially the housing issues. In this segment where I talk about the Caltrain electrification that was going on, I show a video of the Stadler KISS trains for Caltrain electrification testing, because I wanted to show that a lot of things had changed between when I made the trip and when I made the videos. Though, going back to this, when I talk about San Jose Diridan, the audio for me talking about San Jose Diridan is barely audible, so maybe that would be one thing that I would change in this video should I ever remake it. Arriving in Redwood, I do talk about how some videos from my dad of the Caltrain is what made me want to ride the Caltrain in the first place. And I wanted to put some of those videos into this video here, but for some reason my best desktop could not locate those videos that my dad took, so sadly they aren't available for that video. But they are available for a different video, so definitely check it out. Oh, and by the way, this segment is a bit long, so definitely skip to this timestamp when this is not being premiered. Before I talked about Dad's videos, I said this. Back in 2010, or if you're an anti-brony, 0 BEGR or 0 BC, which means 0 before everything got ruined and 0 before cancer, or if you're an Angel Beats fan, 0 BP, which means 0 before pain. Why did I have to die like that? Why? I miss them. For the first part, I was genuinely trying to poke fun at the MLP hate-dem. MLP is short for medical license, please? Nah, just kidding, it's short for My Little Pony. Why 2010 and not 1981? It's because 2010 was the beginning of the 4th generation of my MLP, which went from 2010 to 2019, and with that, everything went absolutely perfectly. Nah, just kidding, 4chan became into liking MLP and they completely ruined it. It's unclear how, but the most possible theory is that somebody was babysitting the kid or something, and one of the first episodes of MLP just happened to have been on the TV at the time. But because of 4chan flooding MLP, things went from chill to absolutely bad for MLP, mostly the fandom. To say that a lot of people liked MLP during the 2010s while just as many people hated it during the 2010s would probably be a major understatement, if not the understatement of the 2010s. I only have memory examples, but I have seen a few people say that because somebody put a MLP character for a fraction of a second in one video, then that video was ruined, as well as a lot of people calling the show cancer, which doesn't really make sense, as a random show for kids doesn't have the ability to create a group of diseases involving abnormal cell growth, but whatever. And it didn't help that because the show was intended for little girls, oh, come on! What's up, gamers, and welcome to my very first Minecraft. Jesus Christ! Jesus, fall to the roof! We're going to be fending off an FBI attack using all these rifles that I purchased from a gun shop in Colorado Springs. And I think the ATF is also going to be after me because I'm not sure if you know my friends. As usual, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe! But what really didn't help for MLP at this point was because the show was originally intended for little girls, a lot of these 4chan users coming in were, well, not little and, well, not girls. And because of that, a lot of the MLP hate-dem genuinely sees MLP as pretty much a pedophile breeding ground. Oh my god, I said that wrong, didn't I? If this petition of people crying over a TF2 cosmetic that looks like a unicorn, even though MLP never invented unicorns in the first place, this one really disgusting MLP fanfic that I don't remember the name of, just that a girl wrote it, because of course when a girl writes it, that's fine, but if a guy writes it, lock the key, lock him up for life, and throw the key to the bottom of the Mariana Trench. Or if Turkey Tom's Brony Degenerates video isn't evident of that, and by god that thumbnail is gonna give me nightmares in the future, then I don't know what is. So, what I was trying to get at was that for the MLP hate-dem, 2010 was the year of doom. From that point, everything was ruined because MLP was everywhere, and that was evil and bad, and that only ceased to be when the final MLP episode aired, which I am 90% sure was the greatest day of the MLP hate-dem's lives until G5 was announced, and again, if the Turkey Tom video isn't evident of that, I don't know what is. Personally, I'm neither a brony nor an anti-brony, so I don't have much say in this thing, and I don't really have strong feelings of likeness or hate to MLP. I've only seen a few episodes of MLP as well as a movie, but that doesn't make me a brony. I kinda want to make a TF2 dub of the movie. As for the angel beats part, well, let's just say that there's a lot of emotional moments in the show, which is kinda expected for an anime that's made by Key. No, not that Key, the other Key. And also, Angel Beats is one of those animes that's labeled as an anime that will make you cry. To be honest, I cried as well. So basically what I was trying to get was that after 2010, everything was painful because Angel Beats existed. But don't worry, Angel Beats isn't all emotional damage, just most of it. The rest is damage to any diseases in your bodies, as Angel Beats is pretty funny. And even though a lot of people don't like English dubs of animes, I think Angel Beats has a really cool English dub.
Miss Tachibana, I'm sorry to ask this here and now in public, but I've always loved you more than any girl in school. So would you please go out with me?
Then ask me at a better time.
Sit down, you.
Okay.
Now he's in for it. He'll fly.
Dubs are cringe my ass. So too long didn't watch for MLP because it was so everywhere on the internet and the fandom was so toxic, and because a lot of people who were not little and mostly not girls were liking something for, well, little girls. And for Angel Beats, Spain. Without the S. But honestly, it was quite an experience riding the Chief, the Starlight, and eventually the Caltrain. Especially considering the fact that in the future, the Caltrain diesel power will be replaced with electric power. And about those gallery cars, they'd be the first time I'd ever ride gallery cars anywhere, but they certainly wouldn't be the last, as I'd ride some again as I went to Chicago. Oh, and did I just mention Chicago? Well, speaking of being Chicago bound, this is when you started seeing some of the exclusive intros for some of these videos that I made. Originally, it was just going to be for the first part, but then I decided to do the other 3 parts with exclusive intros. One thing that I really wanted to mention while talking about my trip to Chicago is that my dad actually told me during the trip that one time he wanted to book tickets to Chicago on board the Zephyr. When he said to get on the train, if I said, "We don't have tickets for the train," he would pull out tickets to Chicago. Honestly, that does sound cool, but I kind of wonder how my dad would have been able to pull that off. But considering I have family, I think they would have been able to cooperate behind my back to pull off something like that. Also, this one track here, I actually never intended to have in the video, but I found it searching for another video of a soundtrack and thought, I like it, so why not? Therefore, I put it in the video. Might not be too good for if I eventually monetize, but I thought it would be fun. After going along for a bit, we do pass a few stations like Ottumwa and Burlington, Iowa. However, one thing I never knew about until after I made the journey was that some of the stations like Burlington and Ottumwa, Iowa actually had steam locomotives preserved next to them. Unfortunately, I probably wasn't looking at the right direction to see the steam locomotives that were preserved. But luckily, I was looking in the right direction to see the steam locomotives preserved in both Galesburg, Illinois and Mendota, Illinois. But yeah, not knowing about the steam locomotives in Ottumwa and Burlington is one thing that I kind of do regret not doing during this trip. Also at Burlington, I do insert this clip here.
Hold up a minute!
Wow, an H2 GEVO!
That's what I thought.
I put that in because I didn't really think that I'd see the same locomotive in Fort Collins as I did in Burlington, Iowa. And I often don't really think of freight locomotives seeing freight locomotives twice whenever I go railfanning for freight trains. So seeing the locomotive in Fort Collins, where I did in Burlington, was honestly interesting to me. When we crossed over into Illinois, I did want to make a joke about Illinois' corruption issues as office holders from both Red Team and Blue Team have been arrested on corruption charges in Illinois for many times in the past. But I wasn't really sure how I would put it, and I didn't really want to bring up politics, so I left it out. Here at Galesburg, I wanted to use a section of a virtual Railfan livestream that I recorded on my phone in hopes to edit it onto the video. However, I got denied permission to use said livestream by virtual Railfan, likely because they weren't sure what I was going to put when I inserted in that section of livestream. The slow motion footage at the end of the video I took of leaving Galesburg is what's left of what I was hoping to have been a segment of the video that I hoped that I would put the virtual Railfan live stream in. By the time we got to Aurora and started seeing Metra, I had seriously wanted to poke fun of a lot of younger Grand Trunk Western 5629 fans. What does Metra have to do with GTW 5629? Well, if you know, skip to this timestamp, and if you don't, well, stay here. GTW 5629 was an Alco product built for the Grand Trunk Western in 1924, and would have been turning 100 in 2024. After many years of freight trains, commuter train work, etc., the 5629 was retired, but not before it ran a few excursions around Michigan, which is where Richard Jensen rode on one of them and really liked her, and with that, he purchased the 5629 for her scrap value. After her rescue from scraps, she became an excursion star during the 1960s, and it was so much so that even at one point Southern Railway President and future Amtrak CEO W. Graham Clare Jr. actually offered to purchase the locomotive for use on the Southern Steam program and cosmetically alter it to look like a Southern PS4 class locomotive, of which one still remains today. Jensen denied the offer though. But to be honest, that kinda sounds cool. Eventually, though, Jensen lost interest in hosting steam excursions for the 5629, and she pulled her last train in spring of 1973. Then, 4 years later, he broke his back moving a fridge for a friend, and the medical bills crippled his finances, and he couldn't afford to pay rent or even store the 5629 at that point. Eventually, though, he would make an agreement with the Rock Island to store the 5629 at the Rock Island's Blue Island yard. But then, in 1980, the Rock Island died. And after that, Metra, RTA at the time, but whatever, took over the yard. Metra wanted Jensen to move the 5629, but he couldn't, because for one, the 5629 was on a landlocked piece of track, and two, she was vandalized while she was stored, including a lot of critical components to move her, like the bearings on her axles. However, at this point, Jensen was becoming a lot less sympathetic, and at this point started planning to get the 5629 scrapped by Metra. Most likely in an attempt to recoup his finances from the medical bills after he broke his back. Metra did not want to scrap the 5629, but after a bunch of antics by Jensen, plus him selling off a couple of parts from the 5629 to local rail fans, Metra had enough and gave them little other option but to go to court. Metra filed suit, and the court ordered that if the 5629 was not moved, she would have to be destroyed. At this point, rail fans and railroad museums around the area panicked and tried to get the 5629 moved. Both the Illinois Railway Museum and the Mid-Continent Railway Museum both made offers to Jensen to purchase the 5629, but Jensen refused both offers. And even Metra themselves actually petitioned the court to seize the 5629 so that Metra could just give it to a museum or whatever. But the courts denied this because legally the 5629 was Jensen's, not Metra's. Sadly though, it was no use, and on July 1st, 1987, Metra received a court order to have the 5629 disposed of, and reluctantly, Metra contacted a salvage company to dispose of the 5629, and by the end of July of that year, the 5629 was gone. Of course, Jensen sued, but ironically, the court told him to off. After this, the railfan community was pissed at Jensen. And people were pissed at Metra too. As Andrew Rail-A-Bammers put it, angry rail fans spread false rumors that Metra hated steam locomotives and was to blame for 5629. Thunderbolt 1000 Siren Productions also says something similar in his video of steam locomotives that got scrapped after being saved. But in my opinion, if Metra really hated steam and wanted the 5629 gone, the 5629 would have been gone by either late 1981 or early 1982 at the latest, and mere weeks after Metra took over the Blue Island Yard at the earliest. Rumors about steam locomotives aren't an excuse to underfund Metra, though. So what I was trying to get at this was that if some of the 5629 fans who actually believe or still believe the rumors actually saw Metra, then they'd have mental breakdowns seeing Metra. I really wanted to put something like that in one of the 3 videos, but I ran into an issue. I just wasn't sure where I would put the jokes, let alone how many times, because I had captured so many Metra trains while in Chicago, and even 2 whole videos of Dad and I riding Metra's electric district, so I dropped it. Probably for the better, because I am honestly not sure if that would have been bullying or not. As for the 5629, she has 2 other sisters that survive, 5632 and 5030, and LACL 1504 looks a lot like her, and she's being restored too. As for other Grand Trunk Western steamers, there's been Grand Trunk Western 4070, and of course, 6325 returned to steam. We miss you, Greg Scholl. Besides, as much as people say that they want the 5629 to be rebuilt, I have other ideas for locomotives we could bring back from the history books. Anyways, I spent a bit too much time on this part, so let's move on. In this part, I made a skit where I was a bit pissy at the ICC for, making the passenger train speed limit 79 miles per hour.
Thanks, ICC, I hate you!
Because I believe the 79 mile per hour passenger train speed limit cap is one reason why a lot of the private passenger trains disappeared. And also that a lot of the private railroads didn't install the technology to get the trains faster than 79. And as mentioned, IETMS was installed from Joliet to Alton, and Brightline has 125 mile per hour speeds, so I wonder what kind of technologies that those technologies can make speed limits faster on various lines. Just saying. Also, since we were in the Midwest by this point, this is where my Charger dubbing went into a bit of overdrive, with more as well as the cafe cars expected soon. There are also a couple of Siemens Chargers here. Also, this part is based off of the can't have in Detroit meme.
Hopefully you can have shit here, unlike Detroit.
Also, this part and a part in the end of the 3rd part was because after I went to Chicago, some animes that were on Crunchyroll prior to me going to Chicago weren't on Crunchyroll anymore, so I made that as a joke. Moving on to part 2, I do start mentioning The Fugitive a lot during this trip because part of the reason that we went to Chicago was because one of our favorite movies is called The Fugitive. And most of The Fugitive actually takes place in Chicago and is filmed in Chicago. Basically, a doctor named Richard Kimball, played by none other than Harrison Ford himself, is wrongfully accused of murdering his wife. He's sent to be executed, but in the bus that he's being transferred onto to the prison where he would have been executed at, another prisoner attempts a prison breakout which fails and leads to the bus crashing, which results in the bus getting hit by a train, resulting in the most awesome train crash sequence you'd ever seen in film history. In the aftermath of the bus and train crash, Kimball escapes, and when the authorities realize it, U.S. Marshal Samuel Gerard, played by Tommy Lee Jones, orders everyone to find Kimball. And soon enough, the two eventually make it to Chicago, where Gerard is basically chasing Kimball around Chicago. And there's a scene in The Fugitive where Kimball is calling his lawyer, and while his lawyer is telling him to turn himself in, Kimball tries to say that he's in St. Louis, but while he's doing so, a train on the L passes by him, and it says and the announcer says, "Next stop, Merchandise Mart." Because of that scene, that's why I say this right here.
The same place that the L blew Richard Kimball's cover
is next.
In The Fugitive.
Doors open on the right at Washington and Wells.
Soon enough, we pass over the bridge that Harrison Ford was standing on while he was playing Richard Kimball and calling his lawyer and telling him that he was in St. Louis. And got off the station that the announcer of an L train announced while an L train was passing over Kimball while he was calling his lawyer. And we got to a hotel a few blocks away where we would have our stay in Chicago. Wait a minute, there was a Gordon Ramsay burger place near our hotel? And the next day, walked to Millennium Station. By this point, after seeing a few videos of r/religious fruitcakes, I was seriously considering making a joke about how extremist Christians, not Christians in general, but people who are extremists, would consider the Museum of Science and Industry as the Museum of Satanism in industry. Because a lot of people view science as Satanism. But anyways, I wasn't sure how I would say that out, and I wasn't exactly sure how I would put those lines, so I dropped it in the end. One of my absolute inspirations for going to the Museum of Science and Industry was this video by TM Books and Video called The Great Train Story, which displays the Great Train Story layout, which I would ultimately see in the museum during my visit too. And even though I was mostly wanted to go to the museum to see the Great Train Story, I also did see a lot of other things too, like the U-boat, the 727, and NYC 999. Also in the NYC 999 section, I do put this in. All the rest were scrapped because of both New York Central's financial situations and because of Alfred E. Perlman.
Oh, thanks, Steven! Oh, that didn't work! I know it didn't!
This was because of that whole thing that Alfred E. Perlman didn't preserve any NYC, Hudsons, or Niagaras, and also because a lot of the other New York Central steam locomotives were cut up for scrap. But it wasn't without reason. New York Central, like a lot of other railroads in the area, was struggling financially, and scrap values for steam locomotives would have given them some money to put back into their network. Not to mention, other railroads in the area have no steam locomotives preserved whatsoever, like the Erie, the New Haven, and the Lackawanna. But the New Haven did try to preserve their last Mikado, but to no avail. So while a lot of people would say that that isn't fair, I think they would have preserved more steam locomotives, but they had no choice. Fortunately, believe it or not, Perlman actually did donate 999 and NYC 2933. So at least those two are safe for generations to come. Even so, it was still fun going to the museum and seeing what kinds of things it had in store for us. It even had this whole Lego display. Dad and I even built some things with Legos. Also, when I recorded the South Shoreline trains, I put in a song from the South Shoreline story when the South Shoreline trains were on screen. At least for the first 2 times. I originally wanted to do it the 3rd time, but I thought against it, so I didn't do it. And while I was showing the photo of the pizza place, I do mention my mom because one other person that I know of that would have loved to have been to Chicago was my mom. Unfortunately, she couldn't come. And that's the photo of the pizza that we got. Man, if only Mom came with us. Also, about this shot of the Hiawatha pulling out of Union Station, I honestly was seriously expecting a Metro train because Metro trains were more common. But I was not disappointed with an Amtrak train. About that Glenview part, yes, it is true that Amtrak wants to expand the Hiawatha service to 10 round trips, but Glenview is the one thing standing between them and fourth base, as NIMBYism has so far shot down 2 attempts to build a 10,000 foot long siding in Glenview. Although, looking at an aerial view of Glenview, I gotta admit that third track would probably be a bit of a squeeze. Metro did demand that as a condition for the Campac and KCS merger, but I'm not sure if that would have gone through or not. It hasn't gone through yet, so I'm not sure what's going to happen to the Hiawatha service expansion ideas or that third track. Also, before we went to Chicago, Dad and I did want to watch The Fugitive again to get an idea of which locations in Chicago some of the scenes were filmed at, but we couldn't find the copy until after we went on this trip. So we went to a few of the wrong locations, especially where we thought the fight on the L train took place. I thought that it took place at Belmont Station, probably because of the announcer saying Balbo, but in reality it took place at the Clark and Lake Station. And moving on to part 3, this footage taken here is one of my first attempts at the April Fool's prank that I would later pull. Although I didn't really like it as much, so now it's an outtake that I put in as some footage for the video. Also, just a quick thing about the section where I talk about what I thought that train backing out the Chicago yard must have been achieved, it's because I've been on virtual Railfan for a bit, would tend to notice what kind of contests Amtrak trains would have while passing by virtual Railfan cameras. And before we left the Chicago yard, we witnessed our first encounter with the not ugly variant of the Charger, the ALC-42. And I do like it better because it looks like the ACS-64, and I already like the ACS-64's design. And to be honest with you, if I had it my way, honestly, every single Amtrak Charger that Amtrak has would look like the ALC-42. Also, that particular ALC-42 was later involved in an incident where it charged into a truck and got damaged. Luckily, nobody was killed, but as much as people say that they hope that the Charger would be scrapped, I think that the Charger will be repaired and live to charge another day. But without Phase 6, though. Miles and miles of Chicagoland later, and passing a few Metro trains along the way, we left Chicago, entered Galesburg, and passed to the eastbound counterpart. And when we got to... And I did want to mention that when we got to Galesburg and looked at the virtual Railfan camera, I did see that Amtrak 46 was on the train, and I honestly was trying to contain my excitement a bit, but I didn't really want to explain it to you guys, so I left it out. And later on, going into Ottumwa, can anyone say if I pronounced that correctly or not? I recorded the arrival on both my phone camera and my DSLR camera, so I started to show both POVs to show like the difference in quality and what I was trying to show on each one. Later, going into Omaha, was at this point using my phone camera to record rather than my DSLR camera. By this point, I pretty much put my DSLR camera away for the day, and now that I think of it, I really should have brought the DSLR camera back out to record after I ran out of space on my phone camera. Also, I do mention that I would have put in Omaha by Counting Crows, but I wasn't sure what the copyright claims would look like, whether it would be okay to put onto YouTube or be blocked worldwide, so I ultimately left it out. Skipping over a bit, when mentioning C470 is basically a 3/4 ring road around Denver. So to me and others, it's basically the boundary of Denver and its outer suburbs. While waiting outside of a yard to go into Union Station, I do film my April Fool's prank, and I do explain my April Fool's prank in the video that in this video series. But not before I threw the entire Valve game fandom into their 126th crippling depression this month after hearing the number 3. You can watch the video for yourself to understand my joke, but if you don't want to, I'll tell you here and keep it sweet and simple. Basically, most animes don't make it to a season 2, and those that do make it past a season 1 and get a season 2 often take years to get the season 2. With my sights set on No Game No Life and Chivalry of a failed Daffy English Connecticut, because both of them ended on cliffhangers and are probably the most iconic of animes that don't have a season 2. The other two were Charlotte and Trinity 7 were because a lot of people wanted season 2s of those animes, so I put them in. I wanted to do Classroom of the Elite, but it got a season 2. And I honestly did think of In Another World with my smartphone, but it got a season 2 after the trip, so that probably would have aged poorly, to be honest. I would talk about how animes either do or don't get season 2s, like popularity, but like Madhouse and a lot of their single season animes, I don't have time for them, so let's move on to the Heist Dwelling.
What's up guys, this is Heist. We're here in Golden, Colorado at the Colorado Railroad Museum.
My vlog, for lack of better terms, of the Colorado Railroad Museum is probably my favorite one so far. I came here primarily because I saw on Trains Magazine that there was a Colorado Crossings event going on, but also because I had just finished my last day of school by that point, and so I wanted a gift to celebrate me graduating high school, though I kind of forced my dad and his brother out to this museum, kinda. When I showed the video of the Telegraph, I mentioned how somebody would be so confused about what I was typing into the Telegraph if they knew Morse code. And that's mainly because of this whole meme that if I tapped really rapidly, then somebody would think of the most bizarre crap if they knew Morse code. The bizarre crap in this instance was turning into an Inuyasha-like dog demon and, I guess, killing all of humanity. And as I said, there is a lot of equipment at the museum, mostly narrow gauge, but there is plenty of standard gauge too. Though if I tried to explain all the equipment that was there and their histories, we'd be here all day. So the Colorado Railroad Museum itself has some videos about the items on display that it has. Also, in addition to seeing a steam locomotive in action, one of the reasons I went to the museum was to see the Delhi Wigwag, which was just recently installed after it was replaced in March of 2021. As a 2023 update, that wigwag is now back in operation, as was seen in a later video that I shot a year later in August of 2023. Right there, but when I was there, it wasn't on operation yet. Anyways, about that kitchen, I meant K37 that was over there. I do talk about how there's a thought that the K37s were converted from standard gauge to narrow gauge, but in reality, that was far from the truth. The locomotives were rebuilt from standard gauge C19 consolidations. They utilized the boilers from the C19s and rebuilt the locomotive for narrow gauge purposes. Also note how in the Wikipedia articles of the four DNRGW Mikados, the K27s, K28s, and K36s all have locomotive builders like Baldwin and Alco, but the K37s say DNRGW Burnham shops. After I showed a clip of a heist stream that explains all that, I then say this. Yep, just like there's 104 days in summer vacation, and that the Japanese used katanas before they received guns, the K-37s being converted from standard gauge to narrow gauge is also a lie that's been told by the council. For the 104 days part, it's because I remember when I was like 8 or 9 that I went to my calendar and tried to count how many days in my summer vacation there were. And instead of 104 days, I counted 80-something days. My heart sunk. As for the katanas part, as much as Japanese cartoons, TV shows, video games, books, comics, etc. make you think, the katana wasn't the primary weapon of choice in medieval Japanese battles before the gun came to Japan. While some people can explain it in more detail, basically the yumi or the longbow was the primary weapon of choice, while the yari or the spear was the primary melee weapon. The katana was only used if the situation was so freaking dire that somebody had no choice but to use the katana. Also, after blowing the whistle of the kitchen, I meant the K-37, I honestly kind of want to make a reference to both Back to the Future and Polar Express, where both Doc Brown and the hero boy said, I wanted to do that my whole life, but I didn't, because I kind of decided to leave it unedited. Also, my uncle did record me blowing the whistle, but the video that I got so far from him is a really crunchy video, so I wasn't really going to ask my uncle to give him the video that he made anytime soon. So I just didn't put it in. Also, later on, I do say how the 638 is the only surviving Rio Grande standard gauge steamer, and how all the others got scrapped. I did say that it was because of Perlman, but that was because I was going through this whole Perlman is the reason a lot of the steamers were scrapped thingy, because of History in the Dark. In reality, I think Perlman had way less to do with the reason all the Rio Grande standard gauge steamers were scrapped, because Perlman wasn't really in a position to have all the steamers and the Rio Grande ordered to be scrapped, even though he did purchase a lot of diesels. And in addition to that, somebody else, not Perlman, must have made the decision to not bother preserving any of the Rio Grande standard gauge steam locomotives, as Perlman left the Rio Grande in 1954, but the last standard gauge steamer of the Rio Grande was retired in 1956. So in reality, somebody else at the top of the Rio Grande decided to not have any of almost every standard gauge steamer scrapped, or no museum or town wanted any of the standard gauge steamers, or a mixture of the both. So now something is telling me that I probably shouldn't have put that in the video. And just like in the arrival into Ottumwa, Iowa, I did split the screen again in this video kinda to show the DSLR camera's POV and the phone camera POV. So this time I had more emphasis on showing the DSLR footage because I felt like I wasn't really particularly interested in showing stuff from my phone camera, and I felt like I may have captured some more from the DSLR. And overall, I think I synced the sounds well. 3500 or 5300. Oh, and before anyone asks, no, I wasn't subscribed to Heist at the time, nor did I know about Heist, so I wasn't really trying to look for him during this trip. Although, now that I look at the footage, I think I may have caught him once or twice, mainly around the 491 when she was about to run her rounds around the loop. And I do the Ottumwa, Iowa, like, screen sharing thing again. Now the big boy. I saw on Trains magazine that the big boy was coming to Denver again. And while it would have been my third time seeing the big boy, I still wanted to see it anyways. And yeah, the big boy draws in like a four times in squared crowd whenever it goes anywhere. While there isn't much to talk about here, one thing I do want to mention is that this is basically where I started to begin dubbing sounds of the Left 4 Dead 2 Smoker onto the General Electric Genesis locomotives. GE locomotives, which may or may not be because they worked with Alco, who used to produce steam locomotives, tend to smoke a lot, and so something clicked in my head that linked the GE locomotives like the Dash 8s, Dash 9s, AC4400 CWs, and especially the Genesis with the Left 4 Dead 2 Smoker, so for some reason I thought that would be a bit funny though.
Yep, 62.
But yeah, I was only there for like the first 3 or 4 hours because I already had work later that day, and besides, even if I didn't have to stay the whole time, I was still glad to see the big boy anyways. Now let's get into something that I actually filmed this year. I did want to include some things that my brother and I did before we went back down to El Paso, such as going to a barbecue place and eating some really good barbecue, as well as going to White Sands National Park. I did at one point have the intentions of throwing some of the videos that I took of trains while traveling to El Paso in the video, but I didn't include them in the end. Again, that is why scripts are important. And this line is basically the line that I said in California, but a bit of the reverse, actually. Or as the Californians would call it, the cuckoo crazy conservative states run by, hypocritical conservatives? I don't know, but here we are. That is based on news that I've been constantly overhearing whenever I've been to my parents' house. And by news, it's more like political demonization and doomerism. Though my analysis may not be entirely accurate now, because I've been trying to block out the news that my parents watch ever since I got to college. Also in here is footage, is a bit of a tribute to the Southern Pacific using footage that isn't mine, but I definitely credited the guy. So hopefully he's chill with credit. After the Sunset Limited arrived at the station and I boarded the Sunset Limited, I do note how the bi-level Superliner cars are really old. They were built between 1979 and 1981, as well as between 1991 and 1996. However, as of the time of recording this, Amtrak has issued a request for proposals to replace the bi-level Superliner fleet. They have yet to do so for the single-level fleet, though. Also, I mentioned how Amtrak included in a recent 2035 proposal an extension into Mexico. However, I also mentioned that it would have been really difficult if Amtrak were to do so because Mexico doesn't have an Amtrak equivalent passenger railroad. However, as of the making of this video, the Mexican government has been trying to make their own passenger rail system similar to Amtrak and Via Rail, or at least have the freight railroads operate passenger trains. But no, the El Chepe and Tequila Express don't really count since they're more of tourist trains than intercity trains. Even so, one thing that I would like to mention is that a lot of things have changed in the past couple of months for Mexican passenger rail ever since I made the video. And I honestly am quite excited to see what the future has in store for passenger rail in Mexico, even if I'm American. Going back to the trip I took on the Limited, although it was pretty fun, I gotta admit that at some points I was pretty arrogant and wasn't really paying attention to others, especially since I was listening to music most of the time with headphones on.
Every night is crazy when the daddy's not around. Go take dance and party all night.
Because of that, this is probably my least favorite of the vlogs that I did, because over the whole video, while editing the video, I couldn't help but keep on telling myself, "Shut up, Harrison, there are people around you!" My arrogance and ignorance because of me blasting music through some headphones got to the point where I at one point was ignoring two crew members telling me that I wasn't allowed to go into the sleeper cars as a coach passenger. But even after that, I still managed to have some fun on the trip, especially when I got to the dining car. And count my lucky star, or bless myself, because Amtrak had just reintroduced traditional dining to the coach passengers by the time I made the trip. So I wasn't going to eat that flexible dining crap that Dick Anderson introduced. And I got to sit with somebody who I would ultimately manage to have a conversation with, primarily because my parents weren't there to force me to do so, and because Bochi isn't literally me. I mean, Bochi is literally me?
We've been working on the railroad every Amtrak day. Make travel nice and easy all across the USA.
He was a guy who had come on the Sunset Limited from Houston, and we managed to sit down and talk about all sorts of things train related, such as train adventures that we have been on, and like what kind of trains that we liked. And he even remembered when the Sunset Limited was still owned by the Southern Pacific. Unfortunately, the Southern Pacific was trying to kill the Sunset Limited before Amtrak got the train. But honestly, something like that is something that you don't really get to see while traveling on an airplane or driving to a destination. And to be honest, I felt like I may have made a friend while sitting in the dining car. Not to mention, he also had friends too that he made along the journey. So, while this is my least favorite vlog, I think that the dining car section was the most fun memory that I have from this trip. And while it sucks that it ultimately had to come to an end, at least I recorded that for the video, and that the video includes that section. So that is one thing that I can say that I love the most about my least favorite vlog. Before I wrap up my vlog section, let me talk about what I said and did in Tucson. Remember last time when I got denied permission to use footage from a virtual Railfan camera? Well, this time I actually did get to use virtual Railfan camera footage, though it was more screenshots, as was with the compromise that I made with one of the guys at Virtual Railfan. But I still feel like even if it was screenshots, it's still better than nothing. Also, some relatives that I had in Tucson took me to a train event at the Tucson depot that also included 1673. That's why you see a clip from that event during this section here.
I don't think its life is over yet. I still believe that this machine behind us still has a lot of life in it left. And I'm gonna work hard, that eventually for the next 100 years, that kids who will be playing on it, it just won't be dead. This thing will be living, this thing will be breathing. And that all of you can enjoy your hand on the throttle and blowing the whistle and annoying our neighbors even more. Thank you so much, Taylor. Congratulations.
I also mentioned the proposals Amtrak has to bring train service back to Phoenix, especially with the Sunset Limited, as Amtrak also wants to bring the train back to daily service, as it was in the days before of the Southern Pacific Railroad. I honestly hope that they happen, but it won't help without a lot of people advocating for the proposals to become reality. So again, annoy your politicians if you live in Arizona and you want to see Amtrak service or return to Phoenix. Anyways, that's enough of me rambling about my vlogs that I made. Let's move on to some shorter videos, shall we? Ever since going to Fort Collins in 2022, I would try and capture trains whenever I could, mainly after my class is finished. Though prior to my second year, prior to 2023, I would often upload videos of trains in Fort Collins independently, and not in a whole series. But then after a while, I started to get more and more trains. That I realized that putting them individually just wasn't going to cut it anymore, so I ultimately made it into a series. The primary videos that I'd capture are the local trains in Fort Collins, mainly that of the BNSF, which would often, the BNSF power would often have SD7D Max on them, but in some instances, they'd have Dash 9s, GEVOs, and in this case, 2 Jeeps. In addition to that, the Union Pacific has a branch to Fort Collins, at which the Union Pacific would operate a train that goes to a cement mine northwest of Fort Collins too. The power is typically UP SD7DMs, but there'd also be SD40-2s too. The short line Great Western Railway of Colorado also operates in Fort Collins, typically with older EMD power, like this GP40-2W. But all sorts of trains pass through here along BNSF's line, mainly manifest trains or grain trains and autorack trains. Though trying to catch a lot of the trains in Fort Collins, especially the BNSF trains, can be, well, challenging sometimes.
You are so fast!
Not really. So you do have a lot of instances where I'm just running towards a crossing. But the shots would often be worth it later on. Besides, running is good exercise. Actually, trying to catch the trains is hard and difficult enough for me, though. What's even more difficult is actually having the patience to wait for the train to come by. Not to mention, there are a lot of times where I'd wait hours upon hours just for a train to go by, and no train would go by, which would cause me to give up and head back to my dorm. And then, only then, does a train go by, and I'd miss the train. Despite this, I managed to accumulate hours upon hours of a lot of trains going by in Fort Collins throughout 2023. Even some rare sightings and trains, like this one windmill blade train that I saw in April. But since we're nearing the end of 2023, I want to sit back and take a moment to show some of my favorite captures from 2023. These are my top 11 favorite captures in Fort Collins from 2023.
And 73. $58.71. 76.38. Oh my god, Canadian Pacific! Woo! 86.06! Canadian Pacific. Carry me 2,000 miles. Shelter after this. This time. $10.84, 47.71, 70.55, 40.36, and 38.56. Whoa, 53.93 and 37.33. I can smell smoke. to 5640, 5247, and 7043. $77.04, 54.32. $85.96 and I think $89.20. Ladies and gentlemen,
That was an all EMD contest. Sunday 638 and Jersey Central 1071. Woo! The wait was worth it. Woo! Non-GEVOs. And long hood forward. And 4458. Check out that smoke. Can't see it, but it's smoking. This is unexpected. 4690. Oh my God! And X Santa Fe. Woo! 659, 4692, 6658, and 5911. That I certainly like K3LA horns on both the AC4400 CWs and the Dash 9s because they are a gift from God. Outside of Fort Collins, I've also railfanned a lot in Denver, but as mentioned earlier, I did take a trip on the Amtrak Sunset Limited, and along the way, I managed to take a lot of videos of trains along the Sunset Limited's line there. And sometimes, I'd catch trains by sheer pure coincidence. Like this one time where I was going to see the Pima Air and Space Museum's DC-10 and some other airplanes, and by sheer coincidence, a train passed by the museum as the train tracks run near the museum. But just like FoCo, a lot of my railfanning in Denver has been constant waiting under the sun for hours upon hours, as this took place in mostly the summer, and waiting for a train to go by, which would often take a lot of time to actually happen. But when it does happen, it's really cool. And to anyone who's wondering if I was about to suffer heat stroke, don't worry, it wasn't all waiting in the sun. Just most of it. The rest was waiting in the rain, giving me the perfect opportunity to say this. People think that I'm insane as I'll even go out in the rain. The highlight of railfanning in Denver in the summer was when I got to see Amtrak 164. But since we're ending the year, let's I want to share a top 10 video, a top 10 section of trains that I've seen in Denver and elsewhere. So, here we go. 7976, 7980, 7822, 7107.
Thank you again for coming.
President Charles Crocker of the Southern Pacific Railroad. Portrayed by renowned Tucson historian David Devine. Now you know, that day his speeches were made, the crowd cheered loudly. All right, so now you've got a role to play in this.
God! 5017, 7906, 5611. Oh, sorry, ma'am. So 1 and 4. There she blows! Canadian Pacific, 8868. To Everyville, 7309.
Thank you again, right on time. Thank you guys.
4766, 1053.
Thank you, Stacy. Stacy was moved here from Colorado. He's here with his son. And
it's dark, but those locomotives are definitely smoking hard. Those ALC 42s won't smoke nearly as enough, but won't be as fun without the chugging, almost steam locomotive chug of the Genesis. kidding me? Oh wait, never mind. 1077. Oh my god! No way! Alright, and I think that's it. And I think I've covered everything this year. Hopefully there wasn't anything I missed out, and surely there wasn't something that skyrocketed me to where I am right now in terms of subscribers to be the main reason that people have been attracted to my channel. And
You!
okay, fine, I'll talk about the train memes.
Memes. The DNA of the soul.
The train memes that I created was honestly something that I was hoping to be the sideshow, but because of the algorithm, it became the main show. At first I uploaded 3 train memes videos, but then after the third video, that third video blew up and pretty much became the reason why a lot of people know about my channel. And why at least one or two people every once in a while get salty. The train memes were fun at first, but honestly after a while they began to be a bit more of a pain than something that I actually wanted to create, as after the third video blew up, suddenly it had a copyright takedown notice, and I had to delete that before I could get a strike. And for the fourth video, I almost had it taken down and banned from a server that I was on, because apparently 2 memes were by somebody, and he didn't like the fact that they were on there. So I had to take them off of that specific video. And I'm not saying who did it, but still. Then Train Memes 5 got copyright strikes, so that was gone. And eventually Train Memes 8 also got copyright striked, so that forced me to private then unlist all of my videos until further notice. So yeah, the train memes honestly were fun at first, but after a while they became more of a hassle for my channel. Not to mention the fact that even though the train memes would rack in views, they wouldn't exactly rack in money should I ever be monetized. So do expect a huge slowdown in how frequently the train memes videos come out. And to be honest, I do want to end the train meme series entirely, but I do want to go on for now and see how things will be like before I ultimately end it altogether. As for other content, I have some videos where I have uploaded compilations of games that I have played. I do have a lot more of them under editing right now, so do expect a few more of those kinds of videos in the future. So, now that I've talked about all that, what's for the future? Well, in the short term, this video, some random railfanning videos, and I do want to make a whole video of why railroad nationalization probably isn't the best solution to the issues in the rail industry currently. In addition to that, I have an upcoming spring break occurring, so I have been thinking of traveling to either the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge railroad via riding the California Zephyr, or traveling all the way to Maryland and seeing the Western Maryland Scenic Railroad via traveling on the Capital Limited, though probably not both at the same time. And in the long term, well, I want to ride on an Amtrak route that has the Siemens Venture cars in service, and I do want to go to Florida to travel on Brightline, but I'd probably have one hell of a time attempting to do that because I'd encounter a lot of Florida men. But hopefully, when Brightline West opens, I won't have to deal with Florida men. As for now, I'd like to take the time to wish all of you an enjoyable Christmas season and a new year full of joy. Of course, some of you might not experience that joy, as some of you may get misfortune this year, but just, I guess, pray that misfortune does not happen to you. As for now, Merry Christmas to everyone, and Happy Birthday, Jesus. Now then, to finish off this video and this year in review,
may we all get to grow up in a red, white, and blue little town. Get a one-star hand-me-down Ford to try to fix up. Some part-time cash and driving a tractor. Found a sweet little thing. Where's your ball cap backwards? Kind of place you can't wait to leave. 'Cause you miss it too much.
Oh my God! 57
Play the Travis tread right above the two-pipe before you get lost down some road.
5438. Third one to smoke.
And know that 15 minutes of fame us ain't gonna be what makes us or breaks us, but we'll all be watching the TV.
I'm from Denver.
The day that it comes. May we all know that nothing ain't cool till you wear the new sound of the going down. Play the Travis tread right above the two-pipe before you get lost down some road. With the top of the back of the Bronco, 5 gold sixer with a cash in lock. Smiling with her hair blowing out the window. Where you about to go? You need to learn to fly. If you can't, then you just free.
Whoa, whoa, hey!
Whoa, whoa.
4766. 1053.
May we all do a little bit better than the first time. Learn a little something from the worst times. Get a little stronger from the hurt time. May we all get to have a chance to ride the fast one. Walk away wiser when we crash one. Keep hoping that the best one is the last one. Yeah, you learn to fly, and if you can't, then you just free fall. May we all, may we all, may we learn to fly, and if you can't, then you just free fall. May we all.
138. And 43.
there she blows!